Hi, everybody. Welcome. Y'all are here on time to tea session. Welcome to our tea session where we're going to be talking about toxic workplaces and in a very specific way, but I'll leave that to when we finally get into it. Where are y'all tuning in from? Let me know where you're tuning in from. And if you have some tea, let me know what tea you're drinking in the chat too. So and today I'm going to be drinking some red rooibos. I'm probably going to add a little bit of honey and just keeping it simple today, but with one of my favorite teas to drink at night. Fresno, California. Okay, over from the best side. Welcome. Welcome. Cleveland, Ohio. Nice. I'm going to be in Ohio in a week and a half for the Summit of Greatness. And yeah, very excited to be in Ohio for the first time. So hello. And hello to the people that just popped in. Phoenix, Arizona. Love to see it. Y'all are really cross country over here. If you're just popping in, we're just like saying where we're tuning in from and also what tea are we drinking if you're drinking tea. If you're not drinking tea, what tea you are going to decide to drink tonight as your self-care practice. The Bahamas. Love to see it. Okay, keep popping in, wherever you're tuning in from, where, you're situated, and also whatever tea you're thinking to drink or whatever tea you are drinking. For me, it's going to be red rooibos. So let's talk about these toxic workplaces. I didn't realize that this was like a really popular topic among my community members. There are a lot of people that are in workplace environments that they're seeing has an element of toxicity within it. I will say though, that this mass migration out of workspaces that we've experienced inside of the pandemic or post-pandemic, I guess you can say, is a testament to the quality of workplace environments that have been present, I think worldwide. I think we can't even just say the US. I think this is a worldwide experience. I see that green tea in the chat. And so this is something that I think in some ways is connected. We have workplace environments that aren't contributing to people's mental wellness and those wellness practices that people are now really beginning to employ in their lives and actually like integrating, being more intentional about. They're not matching up with their workplace. They're just not. And people are realizing that, like, I want to be well. My workplace doesn't contribute to my wellness. It actually, in many ways, can be very toxic. And I think I need an exit strategy. And I think that that's where a lot of people are. If that's you, like send me a happy emoji or something, or maybe like a whatever emoji, because it probably happy is not even appropriate for the topic. So yeah, I mean, I think that it's unfortunate that people have been feeling that way about their jobs, right? Because you spend so much time inside of a job. And also, I think this is an opportunity for a lot of people that are the heads of corporations or the heads of businesses to really take a really good look at their corporate culture and see in which ways it's conducive of opening up an opportunity for mental wellness or doing the exact opposite. So hopefully it invites in conversation at a global scale within environments that are workplace environments, whether they're like in corporate or like other kinds of environments. Hopefully that does happen. Leo, mommy's on live. Why do you always do this with the lives? It's his show. So hopefully there would be, some sort of conversation that can be had. But the conversation that I want to have with y'all here is a conversation around how you can stay well while you're still in an environment that can very well make you sick, emotionally sick. We don't want that for you. I know you don't want that for yourself. And so if you don't, then we're on the same boat here. And let's be honest, it is very likely that you're not going to be able to transition from the job that you're in and find a workplace environment that is more conducive of your peace. That's almost always the case for folks, right? Especially when people are talking about toxic workplace environments, it's typically because they feel like there's no exit that they can actually facilitate for themselves. They feel like they're stuck and they feel like they need to figure out what they can do in that environment to be well. So I want to bring in some of the practices that I would typically, in my coaching practice, like I would typically say to people to do so that they can experience emotional release from the emotions that are being captured inside of their own mind and body in reference to these workplace dilemmas. And y'all know me, I'm holistic, right? So I like mind, body, spirit. So, of course, we always got to start with whatever it is that is in the body that is being, captured in the body as stress. The body's always first because the body is the biggest depository of our stress. And so we always want to make sure that we're attending to the ways that the body is just making us feel the weight of how toxic our workplace environment is. So what I like to do typically with folks is that I like to make suggestions for people to actually like bring in some of the stress relaxation practices inside of their workplace. What does that mean? That means that if you have the capacity to actually plug into something, that you're plugging into solfeggio sounds, for example, which are these sounds or sound frequencies that can actually help you to enter a state of relaxation that can help you really throughout your day to feel a greater sense of ease. It's almost like the sound bath meditations that I do. They're presented at specific frequencies in order to actually create micro vibrations inside of the body so that you can experience stress relief in the moment, but also in the long term. So, Elizabeth with the ginger tea. Hey, hey. Hi, Danny. So I think that is, something that people can actually like do on a day-to-day basis that can actually like minimize the ways in which your body is capturing the stress. So that's one thing. And another thing that people can do, which I used to do when I worked in corporate America, not even corporate health, which was when I worked in a big hospital setting, that was corporate health. When I still worked in corporate America, in the area of media, when I worked there, I used to actually, before I even knew anything about like psychology and the ways that I do now, I was a yogi and I used to practice yoga all the time. And I used to learn about deep breathing and what the breath could actually do to restore and help our bodies enter into a recovery phase whenever we're feeling an element of overwhelm inside of our bodies. So I used to be in these like huge corporate meetings that were very overwhelming. Corporate America, especially in the upper echelons of corporate America, can be incredibly stressful, right? So I had the breath as a tool, as a mechanism for my healing in those moments when I was in these like very intense meetings. And what I was doing was not only actually helping my body to experience a release of stress, but also training my body to go into a default state of recovery rather than a default state of fight or flight. And so if you are able to actually engage in a practice that can be a nervous system regulatory practice, like deep breathing, like some sort of frequency, whether it's like a sound bath meditation that you plug into, or solfeggio sounds, or binaural beats, like anything that can actually like help you to stimulate a rest and recovery state, then I would definitely suggest that you invite in that idea. So the body first, right? And those are two things that you can do without people really realizing what you're doing. No one's really going to know that you're taking in a slightly deeper breath and entering a recovery state inside of your body, because you can actually mask it while you're also like, taking really good care of yourself. It doesn't have to be like the deep breathing that we do, like, in yoga practice. That is like, I think a little bit more free and like visible. It can be something that's a little bit more incognito, but also allows you an opportunity to feel that release. So that's, something that can be done. And when you're plugging in, no one really knows what you're listening to. So you can actually listen to something that can help you to actually feel better emotionally. So the body, that's the body. I'm forgetting about my tea. Well, it's not ready yet. But if anybody's popped in, which I see a couple people have, let me know what kind of tea you're sipping on as we're having session. And I see you, Baltimore, with the ashwagandha tea. Okay. I love that. Let me know what brand of ashwagandha tea you're sipping on. I'd be curious to know. I drink wild one, which has ashwagandha in it, and then I just like put ashwagandha powder inside of several teas. But I'd be curious to know if there's a brand out there that's really good. So that's the body. For the mind, you know how in relationships where there is little resolution and a lot of grief, sometimes we suggest as therapists for people to actually get into the practice of writing a letter that people will not send out to the individual that it's intended for. A similar process can happen when it comes to a workplace environment where there is a boss or a colleague or anybody that causes you grief, that feels unresolved, that you can't resolve in an interpersonal way because the person is not receptive. Maybe the corporate structure or the institutional structure isn't there to support you in a way where you feel like I can actually dialogue with this person and something can be done around the dynamic. And if you have like all of that baked into the culture where there isn't an opportunity to really facilitate a healing conversation that can actually result in the toxicity being dissolved, then it can be helpful to actually engage in the practice of writing a letter to this individual, saying everything that you want to say. And I always like to urge people to be very unfiltered, because I think people, especially if you have people pleasing capacities, or if you center your emotional experience around guilt, like you just go directly to guilt or directly to shame. I am bad, that's shame. I did something bad, that's guilt. Then it can be really helpful for you to remind yourself to turn off the filter and to then engage in the writing practice in an unfiltered way. Hey, Dallas. So writing a letter to this person, of course, not providing them with the letter because it's going to be a very unfiltered letter and you're going to throw in there everything that you mean to say. That can be something that can produce what we call catharsis. So catharsis was the basic idea behind therapy when therapy first came to be. We believe that catharsis allowed a person to release the emotional tension that was inside of them because they're saying the words that are captured in the mind and that are making them feel heavy. But when you actually say the words, that's the magic of therapy. When you say the words, you cathart. You basically release a lot of the tension that's being captured by way of you keeping those words inside. So you can do something similar like that when it comes to writing a letter. You cathart onto paper. So that's why I always say, like, throw your worries on a paper, let the paper have it, you keep your peace. It's important for us to be able to feel like we have an opportunity to let go of the thoughts that are being captured in our minds that are stuck in a thought loop, because that's what happens to a lot of people. You leave work and what happens? You have an emotional hangover because you can't let go of the experiences that you're having inside of the workplace, because you're stuck in a thought loop. Like, what did they say? And what did I say? And what was not said? And, how did they make me feel? And like, what thing did they point out in a really aggressive manner that, it incited shame inside of me? And all of that is just going through your mind. But if you throw it on a piece of paper, it allows you an opportunity to cathartic. So that's the mind portion of it. Am I missing any cities here? I don't think so. Um, Somebody wants to do that letter exercise regarding their mother. I think it can be done for anybody that's in your life with whom you do not believe that you have an opportunity to have a constructive conversation around how you feel. And it allows you an opportunity to self validate, because you're basically like pouring the words onto paper, and you can also validate in that moment. And it also limits the risk of you being invalidated, which tends to happen very often with people that aren't ready to hear how they may have impacted you in a negative way. Yes. So, emotional hangover, I feel that, yeah, it is real. People leave their workplaces with all of the emotion that they had while they were still there. And it's almost like you're never leaving. You never left. You feel like you are literally always at work, because the emotions that you have while you're at work are always with you. That is no way to live. I'm going to tell you that right now. It it does not feel good. So, I don't want that for you. I know you don't want that for yourself. So, minimizing the emotional hangover can be done with some of these practices. Now, we talk about mind, body, soul, right? So when it comes to like the soul aspect of it all, think about things like self-care. I think that that's a really simple way of like inviting in the soul practice, because it can be anything. It can be, you doing like a self massage while you're like in the shower, right? And like just giving yourself a little bit more of that self love, but also reconnecting with yourself. Because what happens when you're in a toxic workplace environment is that you feel like your head is in the clouds. You don't feel connected to yourself. You don't feel grounded. So, doing things that can bring you back into your own body, into your own self, help you to remind yourself of like who you are apart from this job, apart from this environment, can be incredibly helpful. Um, so all of that is really important. I'm gonna have a sip of tea. I don't know if y'all are drinking yours, but I figured I wouldn't want mine to get cold. And I see your questions, and I'm gonna answer a couple just to make sure I don't miss them. So, what's the best ways of setting boundaries with someone who's micromanaging you? I think this is a really good question, probably one where I could spend an entire life just talking about this one, which I may. Um, but the thing about setting boundaries is that you kind of have to test the boundary, right? You can say something that actually has a word boundary in it, like, well, my boundary is, if you feel like the person can be receptive to that, or if you feel like your job will not be in jeopardy if you were to impose a boundary that literally says, this is my boundary. However, very often people feel like in a workplace environment, that language is not invited, or it may not be conducive of what's perceived as appropriate for the culture. So, what you can do is you can kind of just hint at boundaries, so you can say what you mean to say without like utilizing the words, right? You can say, I'm willing to meet within these time frames, and all other times are times that I'm going to devote to this part of the work. That is you defining a clear cut boundary around when you're willing to like take feedback, when you're willing to meet, like all there's a lot that's being communicated there, but the word boundary isn't being necessarily relayed explicitly, right? And so I say that just to offer options, right? Because sometimes like we need like variable ways of being able to relay the information, so that, we can keep our jobs, but also we can keep our peace. Very important, right? We want the balance. Um, but a great point that I hope to for sure um, expand upon. If there's anybody that has any like thoughts, definitely pop them in the chat. If you have ever been in a situation where you needed to impose boundaries, um, definitely, say it. Now, let's talk about micromanaging, the message behind micromanaging. The message is I can't trust you with your own work. I can't trust you with doing your job. Um, and sometimes you can ask a question that helps a person to really consciously think about the fact that they don't seem to trust you. Like, do you trust me to do this? Like, or, you know, do you trust that I can deliver like a really good brochure to you by tomorrow? And, really like help them to think about that. Think about the underlying message that's being relayed and flip it back. So yeah, so that, I think that sometimes it's almost like the concept of reverse psychology, right? Like you're flipping the question or the messaging back onto the person so that they can then digest that information. And one, it's relaying that you are getting the message that they're not trusting you with your work. And two, it's helping them to really sit down and think about it. Even if for the few seconds that you propose a question, and that's the extent of the time in which they're thinking about that question, that's still a couple more seconds more than maybe what they've, um, than how much they've thought about it before. What if you have a tendency to not trust others and can slide into micromanaging team members without realizing? Ooh, look at that. We have someone on the other side. Actually, you propose both questions. So if you have a tendency, um, I think that I believe in open, honest dialogue about where our minds are, as I believe in being an open communicator as a leader, right? And so if that is something that, or just a way that you like to also connect with the people that you manage, then it can be helpful for you to say, I really want to trust you with this, and I almost need you to help me to get to that place. What do you think can help me to trust you with this task so that I can be a little bit less hands-on, because I want you to have autonomy and agency over your work, and I want you to feel good about the end results and the product that you produce. So how can I help you get there? Or how can I, what can be done in the context of your work that can help me to feel like I can trust you and I can let go? So I think open dialogue in those ways can be really helpful. Here from New York, New York, K Manhattan in the building. I love that you love this conversation. Thank you. That's a great question. For those being micromanaged, if trust is the issue, I'd love to know how I can help someone trust me. Absolutely, right? Like whenever it comes to anything in life that is a relationship dynamic, I always go to what's the root. Always. I always think about, well, where are we in the conversation, and what is not being said in the conversation that needs to be unpacked further. Typically, there's something underneath, and we're just not attending to it. And what's happening is that there can be a lot of back and forth dialogue, but if the root of what is happening is not being discussed, unpacked, and there isn't like movement forward from that, then you're always going to be in that loop with this person, and it's not going to be helpful for either party. So Um, so yeah, but that was such a good question. I'm so glad that you proposed it. Big cat energy. I appreciate you for that question. That was a really good one. Anybody that's popped in, let me know what kind of tea you're sipping on tonight. If you're sipping now or if you're sipping later, and let me know where you're tuning in from. So Um, I believe that it can be really helpful whenever we are in environments that trigger us, that traumatize us, that make us feel uneasy, uncomfortable, to always, I call this a sandwich method. I've never heard any other kind of language around it. I just created sandwich method because I like to just sandwich the practices. I believe in sandwiching wellness practices before and after work. And I know that people sometimes are just like rushing to work and are not even thinking about what they can do to be well before it. But if you can take 5 minutes, I kid you not, 5 minutes makes such a difference, y'all. Take 5 minutes of your day, take 5 minutes of your morning specifically to just reset and enter your day with a bit more of that emotional stamina that you're going to need throughout your day. Why not? Because the rest of your day can be filled with triggers, they can be filled with animosity, hurt, damaging, um, conversations. The micromanaging can be a part of it. There can be like snarky comments or like the works, right? But if you are already setting your mind, your body, and your soul to say, okay, we're not 100%, but we woke up at 70 and we're at 85, and that's way better of a level to start off at and to go into work with, because whatever that person throws at us, we're going to be a little bit more ready. It literally can take 5 minutes of you doing some sort of a reset around the things that I mentioned in the mind, body, soul practices for you to actually set up your day and prepare yourself for the day. Now, when it comes to after work, the same applies. It can be incredibly helpful to, like I said, sandwich, right? You sandwich your day. So everything that's in between is a work day, right? Like everything that you do for work. Before you do mind, body, soul. After you do mind, body, soul. And you can vary it up or it can be the same. But if you take 5 additional minutes to do that, then you can also offer yourself a really healthy reset. And what that can do for you, especially at the end of the day, is it can help with the emotional hangover of being in that workplace environment that's leaving you with all of those like emotional remnants from all of the toxicity you've had to ingest throughout the day. So some of y'all are drinking some cold tea. Oh, that's pretty cool. I mean, it is hot, y'all, but I'm not a fan of cold tea. I like iced tea. Actually, you know what? I'll take that back. I had butterfly pea flower tea, which, as y'all know, is like one of my favorite. It's a blue tea and it's delicious. When you put honey and lemon on that tea, oh my goodness. So I have this like decanter, like where I put in like some of my favorite like summer beverages and like put little like edible flowers in there. It's a whole vibe. And when you put butterfly pea flower tea in there with some ice, a couple like edible flowers, and you pour it into a cup, it's everything. So I'm down for the iced tea vibes in the building. LA is definitely hot, and so is El Salvador. So I hear you on needing some cold tea, especially right now in the summertime. Um, so Mariah, you're saying my career path, event planning tends to support bosses that may not have my experience, but they all tend to take on my role because it's highly visible. So they all tend to take on my role because it's highly visible. Can you help me a little bit with what exactly you mean by that? I want to make sure that I answer your question, but I'm having a little bit of trouble like understanding the question itself. So what is it that they do? Take on your role. What do you mean by that? Help me out. Phoenix is muy caliente. Oh yes, Cindy. I know Phoenix is hot with y'all 110-degree weather. I would not recommend hot tea, but I'm glad you're here. And if you're sipping on some iced tea, that is very, very much invited. Big Cat Energy African Sunrise Rooibos Tea. Nice. This one is by Nature's Batch 5. And I always link her products on my Insta because I love her teas. This one is a rose lavender infused honey. Hello. But anyways, let's get back. So I really like the concept of sandwiching your self-care practices. I like to take the conversation a little bit out of the workplace environment for just a second, because when it comes to actually mastering a practice, it can be helpful to think about it as a general practice that you're going to employ inside of your life, period. So whenever we're talking about being in balance, we're talking about being in balance because we have self-care practices that are sandwiching our day or scattered throughout our day, whatever your schedule permits, but that you're actually integrating these practices. And if they have some sort of like evidence-based or like clinical background that actually like helps you to understand that they're actually effective in actually being able to help you to release some of the emotions that you are holding on to, then even better. But the thing about these kinds of practices is that they work best whenever they're done continuously, and especially, this is the kicker, when they're done when you're not feeling stressed. So doing the practices when it's 11 o'clock in the morning and your boss has already gotten to you and you are already feeling overwhelmed and like, your head's about to explode, is probably not the best time to initiate the practice. The best time to initiate the practice is when you're still home, or you're in the car, or you're on the train, and you're having a moment to yourself where you can recalibrate and restore before you actually get to a place or to an environment that offers the trigger. That's the best time. It's best whenever you're initiating, and I call it concretizing a practice, meaning that you're like building mastery around it and making it like a pillar in your life, like something that you do on a continuous basis. Is best when you do this when you're not in an actual state of overwhelm. When you're in a state of overwhelm, you're not going to be able to as effectively engage in the practice, and it's going to be a little bit futile. Prayer. Yes. Yes, on your recommendation, Deb Dana's book, Anchored, has really helped me understand deeply the importance of sandwiching grounding practices into every day. There you go. For those that are not familiar, Deb Dana is one of the clinicians in our field that does a lot of somatic-based practices, meaning body-based practices that help with like regulating the nervous system. And I think I've recommended one of Deb Dana's books on the polyvagal theory or polyvagal exercises in one of my previous videos that I have on YouTube that focuses on the that one is the 9 of my favorite books on trauma, and one of them is the Deb Dana book. And there are a number of polyvagal exercises that are situated there. For those of you that are not familiar with what polyvagal theory is, it basically is a theory that helps us to understand how the nervous system functions. And it was like one of those primary theories that helped us to know, like, oh, wait, we have a legitimate nerve that is connected. It's a cranial nerve. It's connected to our brainstem and goes all the way down to the extremities of our body. And it is very much responsible for our stress response. And that nerve has different branches. And there is one branch of that nerve that creates a stress response. And there's another branch of that nerve that actually creates a relaxation response. So if we take the relaxation nerve and we say, please activate by doing things like breathing, like rocking, like humming. If we tell it like, activate, I need you now, then it offers us an opportunity to enter a state of recovery and release, which is what I'm basically saying can be a part of that body-based practice that you can do while you're at work. When you're listening to solfeggio sounds of binaural beats, when you're actually like taking those deep breaths while you're in like, in a meeting that is likely to trigger you. When you're like doing a little bit of rocking, right? Like That's okay. That's like socially acceptable to rock, right? So you can do that while you're like in, in a workplace environment and elicit what is known in polyvagal theory as the ventral vagal response, meaning that it is a parasympathetic response, meaning that it is a relaxing agent inside of our nervous system that can help us to feel at ease. That was a mouthful. We're gonna have some tea on that one. Um, I love how you nerd out about tea. Thank you. I love tea. I love, love, love tea. I love tea and I love therapy. So I'm in my element right now, y'all. Like this is everything to me. So it makes me really happy to be able to create this for people because it also fills me a lot and it allows me to nerd out about the things that I'm really passionate about. So definitely in my happy place right now. So thank you for, being in my happy place with me. I appreciate that y'all, are here. That matters a lot. Let me take a couple more questions. I want to make sure that I'm attending to anything that's present in your minds. And I want to be mindful of Mariah. I plan events, but I tend to report to bosses that don't have a background in event planning. I'm going to stop right there because I know that is very relatable to a lot of people where they may have someone who is their superior who didn't have the qualifications and was hired for maybe other things, maybe charisma, maybe a connection, um, or maybe they have good leadership skills, but not the actual skill for the job, and that is incredibly. It can be very. What do we call it? Help me with some words, y'all. It can be frustrating. It can be angering, exhausting. And I'm trying to like think back to a lot of the sessions that I've had with people that have been in environments where their superiors didn't have the capacity to be able to help because they lack the skill. So I've been on the other side of the therapy couch, like listening to stories of people that have a similar grievance. So I feel for you and um, exhausting and draining. Yes. So we have some words that I think are very, very appropriate. So let me read the second part of your question. Since it's social, a lot of times my bosses will try to do my job and or take credit for my work. I think we need some tea, y'all. We need to have some tea for Mariah. Ah, goodness. Well, that's unacceptable. But I'm sure you know that. And angering, as Big Cat Energy is saying, for sure. You know, when it comes to um, experiences like that, it can be helpful to stand out even more as much as you possibly can. I don't know what the environment looks like. Like I don't have the details like to be able to like kind of like help really like parse out and unpack like how you can show up in a way where people see you and they know it's your work, right? Like the connection is there. They saw you do the work, they know it's your work. Um, so for that piece, I think I'm a little bit more limited in what I can offer as far as like feedback. But I would, if it were me, I would want to stand out and say, no, I did this, right? And there's different ways of doing that, right? You don't have to necessarily like flat out say it in an explicit way, but you can say like when I did blah 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 in conversation with anybody that needs to know that you were the person that was the mastermind behind the execution. um I'm getting into my petty mind right now, but I think sometimes you really have to do that, right? Like, Mariah, I am going to assume that you are woman identified, and if that is the case, even more so, right? Because as a woman we're socialized to actually distill what we contribute. And so it makes it so that even more we need to step out into spaces and proclaim what we've done. And so on the more logistical end, that's kind of like I guess like a nugget that I would like to add. But I also love what community can offer. So if anybody has any like thoughts for Mariah, like please pop them in the chat. Like we're here to help. And on the emotional end, I like the idea of, that those spaces are going to be spaces where your ideas are going to be appropriated, and that's going to cause you to experience a trigger. So if that's the case, then it's always helpful to engage in the sandwiching. That's always got to be a part of the recipe. But also like have a specific, like, let's call it a crisis protocol, a protocol for when you see it happening in vivo and they're taking credit, and what you would do logistically. Yes, which is important. Like you will step into the conversation and say like, do you like what I did or whatever, right? Like logistic. But also what you will do emotionally, like maybe it's like taking a step outside or going into the bathroom, and in that very moment doing something that can be grounding, like the 5 4 3 2 1 method, right? Like the 5 things you can see, the 4 things you can hear, the 3 things you can smell, the 2 things you can taste, 1 thing you can touch, right? Like actually in doing a grounding method in that very moment to help you feel the element of groundedness, so that you can then step back into the environment and reinstigate your voice and say, I did this. Mariah, they're saying probably their insecurity. Yeah. I mean, I think that a lot of what we're talking about today and a lot of these workplace environments, a lot of what we're dealing with is other people's stuff. It's not just that they bring that into the workplace environment. Very often, people will bring their humanness into a workplace environment. They'll bring in their hurt, they'll bring in, their unreconciled relationship dynamics, everything. It's all a part of the game. People will bring in everything that they bring to every environment that they're a part of. A workplace environment is usually not exempt from a person's relationship dynamics, and that's what we tend to see in these very toxic entanglements that people tend to have in their workplace. Stepping away from the environment is great advice. Yeah, Cindy, I truly believe that stepping away from any environment that causes us harm, even if it's a temporary stepping away and getting a hold of, our emotions in a way where we can validate and love upon ourselves and ground ourselves, and then come back into the environment, should we wish to do that, or should we have to, in a more emotionally elevated state. That's always going to be, a good idea in my book. So helpful. Thank you. You're welcome, Mariah. You're welcome. And thank you, community, for also stepping in and offering such great advice. This has been lovely. I am so grateful that y'all tuned in. I hope that your tea time was invigorating, enlightening. It has been such a pleasure for me to have it with you. Remember that I have resources everywhere. I have a course that's out. I'm likely to put out more courses in the future. So if you want to get an understanding of what I'm up to in the course world, just head over to my website, drmarielbouquet.com, and click on courses. And I also believe that it's also highlighted and pinned here. And in addition to that, I'll be here on live having tea session with y'all. So definitely subscribe to this channel and then hit the bell so that you can get pinged whenever we're going live, and then we can have tea together and I can answer some of your pressing questions on some of the topics that we're covering. So thank you so much for being here. It's 8:45. I like to end my sessions on time. So we'll be ending now, but y'all take really good care of your souls, and I will see you in the next one. Take care, everybody.